Hey everyone, welcome back to Logtechlive. Cool little intro video now, huh? Now you guys are on the clock, or I'm on the clock before I go live. Very cool feature from Sarah and her team. Uh, I'm Eric Johnson. For those of you tuning into this show for the first time, I am senior technology editor at the Journal of Commerce, JOC.com. When I'm not doing this show, but we do this show first and third Friday of every month. 10 a.m. Eastern. Super excited to be back with you. Weather's turning a little bit. It's starting to get a little bit of suntan when I'm actually out. You wouldn't know it, but I swear I'm getting a little bit of a tan. It's just nice. Spring, everyone's in a much better mood on it. Let's face it, for real. That's the way it is. So, really excited. If this is your first episode, you picked a really good one. We're going to go in deep on a subject that I actually didn't know a whole lot about until I chatted with our guests in the last few weeks about, and it's a super interesting niche within the trucking industry. So I'll introduce our guest in a bit. If you're a regular attendee of our show, thank you so much for your support. I literally only do this because you all show up and seem to enjoy it. So I always enjoy it, but it would be kind of weird if I just did it and no one showed up. So really excited to be here today. Few things before I jump into news of the week. If you've heard previous episodes, you've heard me talk about this. Our Inland Distribution Conference in Chicago is coming up in September 25th through 27th. If you are in the trucking industry, the intermodal industry, the drayage industry, rail, you need to be at this event. I'm biased, but it's true. Objectively true. This is the most substantive surface transportation event in our industry. It's not an exhibition. It's not a trade show. It's a conference where we talk about real issues. And my colleagues, Ari Ash and Bill Cassidy, the best two in the business, as far as I'm concerned, lead a whole bunch of panels with the biggest newsmakers and shippers and operators in our market. So registration's open. The agenda is already in progress. Like, we have a lot of the sessions already done and filled. I'm going to be leading a few around technology side of things, so keep up to date with that as we add more speakers. But hopefully we'll see you all in September. Right after that, in late October and early November, I will be at the IAPH World Ports Conference in Abu Dhabi, talking about what you guessed it, technology, this time in the ports industry. So always a great event. It really brings most of the large ports and terminal operators and even shippers and carriers and sort of the port users to the table to talk about where the industry is going on a global basis, what regulations the industry is facing. So registration's open for that. If you want a code for either of those two events for a discount, just reach out to me on Twitter, Logtech Eric, LinkedIn. Email address eric.johnson@spglobal.com, and we'll get those. In some upcoming episodes, we'll have those discount codes available to you as well. But if you want to get a head start, by all means, reach out to me on any of the 25 channels I'm active on. So last thing, and again, you've heard me talk about this a lot, but I'm gonna keep talking about it until someone does something about it. Sarah and her team have this awesome initiative called the Blended Pledge. This is an initiative that helps support people in our industry, underrepresented people in our industry, attend industry events and be on panels. It gives them the transportation and travel costs associated with those opportunities. A lot of times people get invited and their company doesn't give them the travel budget to make it happen. So this is to make sure that those people, that we're getting representative voices on stage at industry events. So someone needs to own it. I've said it before. I'm going to keep saying it until someone owns it. All right. Take advantage of this opportunity to be on the front edge of this particular issue. Okay. Let's go to news of the week. I have 4 stories I'm going to share. It's been newsy as usual. Even though freight's a little bit down, it's no shortage of stories to talk about. Yesterday, Bill Driegert, who sort of got Uber Freight off the ground, got hired by Flexport to build their truck brokerage. Huge news. I was actually in San Francisco last week I met with someone at Flexport, and I did a panel with someone named Laurent Hautefeuille. There's my French, who's in Uber's freight's leadership. Talked to both of these companies last week, and lo and behold, Flexport hires Bill Drieger away from Uber Freight. So huge implications potentially. Flexport is going all in into controlling different legs. They don't want to just partner with brokers. They want to create their own broker, in-house broker. In the story that I posted yesterday, we talked about how Flexport has existing relationships with Convoy and Nolan Transportation. For the time being, those will remain, but over time, you would imagine that they will be, turning mostly to their in-house brokerage unit that Bill is going to be leading. So Bill has experience at Coyote and Amazon before Uber Freight. So a lot of bona fides there. Really, really interesting moves being made. Obviously, this comes a couple weeks after Flexport acquired Shopify's fulfillment and final mile logistics assets, especially Deliver, which Shopify had acquired just last year. So we talked about that on last episode. So who knows? Maybe this is going to be a regular cadence where Flexport makes some big announcement every 2 weeks, but we'll be watching. Okay, moving quickly. Yesterday, another story that my colleague Terry Griffiths posted on Journal of Commerce. She wrote about this bill that is being introduced in the House to sort of make sure that the cranes, the big ship-to-shore cranes at all U.S. ports, all ports globally, that they are not conveying secret information to the Chinese government. I think it's fairly well known in the maritime industry that most of the container cranes globally now, probably 80, if not 90% of them are manufactured by one manufacturer in China called ZPMC. I don't know what there is to say about this, except this is kind of paranoid delusional. The thing that I don't want to editorialize too much is that one of the legislators who has brought this bill to Congress is also behind the Shipping Act rewrite, OSRA, that we've talked about a lot on this show, which you may not like some provisions of it, but it was a legitimate attempt to address long-running issues in the international shipping space as it pertains to the U.S. To me, stuff like this totally undermines that. Like if you're putting out things saying, shipping cranes are, conveying secret information, like there's nothing secret at a port, all right? It's literally out in the open. There's trade data about what containers are moving. It's all in manifest information that our sister company within S&P Global has access to. So I'm just curious where this goes. Hopefully it dies very quickly because honestly, we all have much better things to do and limited time to do it. So that's the end of my soapbox on that issue. Real quickly, two other stories. I wrote a couple weeks ago about a story about purchase order management. This was something that we talked about on a session in TPM Tech a few months back. And I sort of revisited this from the perspective of the crazy kind of ups and downs of demand have put an onus on shippers to have better purchase order management. So the story that I wrote was sort of talking about why purchase order management has sort of come back in vogue, where it goes from here, why it's so important, and then also this sort of key delineation that shippers need to make about whether they use software to manage this themselves or they go to a 3PL that offers a purchase order management module. So that's kind of the crux of the story. Definitely encourage you to read it if you haven't yet. It's really key at this point while we're in a bit of a freight lull to get ahead of where you are going next with purchase orders when volume eventually picks up and demand eventually picks up, right? What goes down must come up. Last story real quick. Another big one. I spent a few weeks talking to various stakeholders that are involved in the Department of Transportation's Flow initiative, which was announced right after TPM in 22. So this was March of 22. Remember, things were crazy. Ships were waiting outside of every port. People at dinner parties knew what you were talking about when you talked about logistics and supply chain. The interesting thing is 15 months later, things have calmed down, but this initiative has actually gained momentum. It has 3 times as many participants. A huge number of shippers are participating. There's all sorts of other different entities are involved in this. And the idea is they all give aggregated anonymized data to the Department of Transportation, which creates a few metrics that are measuring supply and demand ratios for key things like port space, container bookings, chassis availability, just to give indicators that shippers that are participating can then turn around and use in their own systems. So it's not a publicly available thing. You have to be part of this in order to get the benefit of it, hence the title of the story. But really interesting to follow, and there's big ambitions for this, and the stakeholders that are involved are super excited about it, which you can honestly not say they, the private sector is usually not happy when the public sector gets involved, but in this case, they totally are. They feel real potential for this. So lots of stuff going on, and I'll be tracking it as usual. That's why they pay me. So, but with no further ado, I am so happy to bring on our guest this week, JD Redmon, Chief Revenue Officer at vHub, and we have been talking for a really long time, and I'm super excited to have you on the show finally, JD. You're on mute.
No, I'm excited to be here. We have talked for a while. We've known each other for about 4 or 5 years back in my time in maintenance. And that's kind of how we started. And then when we ran into each other last year at the inland distribution, I was like, why haven't we spoken? Why haven't we talked? And it kind of started the conversations over again.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to level set for people, what's your background? How did you, before we get into what vHub is, how did you end up there?
Yeah, I started in transportation about 10 years ago at Hertz Rental Cars. Got my feet wet there, and then eventually made my way over to TTN Fleet Solutions, where I was the VP of Sales and Marketing. TTN was a ERS call center. We did emergency roadside service breakdowns. So think of the AAA for big trucks, which is another large P&L gobbler for any carrier of any size, because maintenance is unpredicted. No matter if you have interval maintenance, you still will have emergency roadside that'll take place, tire pops, mud flaps, things of that nature. So that's why I really cut my teeth in heavy trucks and big trucks. I got into the Class 8 with transportation with TTN. And then from there, did 3 years with them, went to start my own agency, grew it fairly quickly, and then sold it. Went from there, and I was doing a lot of consulting, advertising work, and logistics, and ran into Sebastian Bluin, the president of Finlock, who is our funder for vHub. And he was like, well, could you come work with us and see what we can do? And what I thought was just a kind of a good job, a great place to be, it actually turned into a big puzzle. And then I said, you know what, let me call a few buddies. Let me call Jim Coffrin. Let me call Kyle Lentner, Adam Robinson. And I got them all on the phone, and we met. And I was like, I think there's something here, but it's never been created before.
Yeah.
Or can we create it? Yeah. And that was the big conversation back in March of 2022, is how do we build a system and a platform that's bi-directional and agnostic for anyone? And that's how we kind of landed at vHub, and then it's been taking off ever since.
So that sounds like I got the Voltron Lego over my shoulder. So you assembled the Voltron team. You're not old enough to remember Voltron, are you? That's a generational gap there. So that was when I was a kid. All right, vHub. You sort of alluded a little bit to it, but like for people who are not familiar, and I'm sure some people who've tuned in are familiar with it. What is it? Who are your customers, and sort of what are the different ways you serve them?
I assume that no one knows what vHub is. I think we have to do our job of educating, so I appreciate that. Right now, vHub started off as a trailer sharing platform that was focused on rentals. So we were looking at out-of-season carriers who may have 500 trailers in their fleet. During season, they're utilizing 450 of them. Out of season, they may only use 150. Can they place those additional assets on the platform for rent so that they now can absorb and bring in some cash flow net positive to the business while they're giving access to the trailer asset to another trucking entity? Well, in September of 2021, that's when we began to dabble in the reposition marketplace. Now we call it reposition, but if you're in trucking and you've been here a while, you know it as a loadout. So there's two different types of repositions. You have the loadout, which the asset owner says, hey, Eric Johnson Trucking, you can put freight on the back of my asset. You can do everything but haul hay. Great, awesome. Or you have the tow away, which is typically a head haul rate. They're going to pay a little bit more. They don't want you to put anything in the back of their asset. They want you to take it from point A to point B, usually on a quicker time frame. So they're willing to pay a little bit head haul. But anytime you're looking at whether it's a rental or a reposition, the overarching umbrella is operational trailer rebalance. So everyone, entities from mega carriers all the way down to Billy Big Rig, who has 2 trucks himself, they're trying to allocate their assets the best so that they can make sure that they're as efficient as possible. So our primary customer, when you look at it from that standpoint, is the OEM. That's the Hyundais, the Manacs of the world, the Waboshes of the world, who are saying we're creating this amount of trailers a year, and now we need to get them to the trailer pool of Eric Johnson Trucking. Eric Johnson Trucking is based in Atlanta, and let's just use Hyundai Glovis for an example. They're in San Diego. But what if Eric Johnson's Trucking is based in Atlanta and all of his freight and route guides are southeast? Are we expecting Eric Johnson Trucking to bobtail from Atlanta to San Diego to go pick up the brand new trailer and then turn around and come back? Well, that's how some carriers have to do it, which is a high operational cost. But most OEMs are working with people like ourselves and other carrier operations to take those trailers from the OEM and deliver them to Eric Johnson's trailer pool of choice. So that may not be to Atlanta. It could be Eric Johnson's Trucking just won an RFP bid in Charleston, South Carolina, and I want 40 of the new trailers I bought repositioned from San Diego to Charleston. So we are allocating and repositioning trailers to enhance operational network balance, which overall decreases empty miles, which then, if you look at that, that allows more cash flow to go back into the business.
Yeah. And to your previous role, right, that reduces, maintenance issues as well, right? So
You have the maintenance issue reduction, and then when it comes to that, you're able to do your cargo load swaps when you have issues.
Yeah.
That's the biggest push that you have for your need.
So I definitely want to dig into some of the particulars, the details on some of these individual types of repositions. But big picture, like, this is not something that just happened yesterday or during the pandemic. Why has there not been a solution to this sort of before? Like, what have been the constraints that prevented it from happening before?
I think the pandemic exacerbated a lot of issues and a lot of sects that were pain points for operators, specifically on the procurement and the sourcing side in any industry. So when you're looking at our industry, the procurement and the sourcing folks who are out there actually purchasing the trailers and getting them to the appropriate trailer pool, they know about the loadout marketplace. But it was kind of like the wild, wild west. And there was a spot market inside of the loadout marketplace. So if you knew that an asset owner was trying to get an asset to point A to point B the fastest, you may say, pay me $3.50 a mile, pay me $4 a mile, and I'll get these 10 assets to you instantly. These were interchange agreement, one document, handshake, pre-shaded, signed the form. We did our pre-check, we did our post-trip, and it was delivered.
Yeah.
The thing was, it was never digitized. So this was always happening over the phone with your dispatch coordinator, with your fleet manager, with your yard manager, trying to make sure that they manage the flow in and out of a specific terminal. So it's always been there. Kind of similar to maintenance. It's kind of the redheaded stepchild that no one wants to talk about, but it is on the P&L, and it has wreaked havoc, especially with the pandemic.
So it was these things were happening, but in an ad hoc fashion, like where you could kind of connect them manually rather than any sort of like efficient way to figure out the best opportunities at any given time. Is
Correct.
that the way to say it?
This was the loadout marketplace. Typically, it was reserved for people who knew about it. And if you knew and you had a relationship and you knew that I'm going to be in San Diego, I'm going to be near an OEM's plant, and I have nothing to haul back, that's a great option to cover the full cost of my backhaul or a portion of the backhaul.
Yeah.
So primarily just looked at as, yep, I'll do it for you, but I just need to get back home or get to the next profitable lane. The closer I can get to the next profitable lane without losing too much money, then I'm great. That's kind of how it was viewed. You do have some carriers out there who are running power only, who are staying in this niche, and that's what they do all day, every day. And their backhaul is a lane back to the OEM. But in this marketplace, there was never anything that came together like vHub, where we put together a digitized solution or a SaaS in front of customers to where we can bring integrity back. So a lot of this was, hey, Eric Johnson, Redmon Trucking is going to grab your trailer. Thanks for letting me use it. I told you I was going to pick it up on the 19th and bring it back on the 24th. But January 2nd of 2024, you found your trailer, at a random terminal and you got a phone call about it. No one was holding accountable the owner operators, the smaller carriers who were literally stealing, misusing, and orphaning trailers all over the place. There was no type of recourse. There was no structure. With vHub, that's what we brought back into this marketplace, is structure and integrity. I know who's picking it up, when they're picking up, driver ID, pre and post trip confirmations. And what this does is the asset owner, Eric Johnson's Trucking, says, okay, I know who's picking up my truck. They have the appropriate COI. Okay, I know that their safety score is good. This isn't a double brokered pickup, so it's actually someone that I can go touch and has operational knowledge in the field. Whew, I can relax. Previously, you were kind of rolling the dice and you didn't know what was going to happen. You just prayed your assets showed up.
Fascinating. So what, in terms of like the makeup of your business on the loadout repositioning side, like how much of it is the scenario you painted initially where you need to rotate trailers into a fleet and the place where the trailers are is far away from the operational network of the fleet, and how much of it is I got a national footprint and I have a lot of demand in this region and I need a way to get all my trailers are sort of dislocated. How much, like, what's the breakdown of the moves on the platform that way?
I would honestly say 60-40, and I would go 60 on there are carriers out there who have trailers that got gobbled up by accident, and we know what happens. Your driver drives in, they're supposed to unload, keep the trailer, and leave within less than 2 hours. That's what's supposed to happen when you go to a manufacturer. You get there, you're detained, they tell you to go drop the trailer on the east side of the lot. They'll give a call back to your fleet manager, and your driver heads out bobtailing. So you have a lot of carriers on the 60% side that the trailer just got gobbled up, and now it's just all over the place, spanning on. And if there's no relationship with that, Eric, what you're dealing with is spot market dislocation. So that means I'm coming out of my hub and I'm going to anywhere that may have the best lane for me. And my trailer got gobbled on a route in a lane that I typically don't run, and I don't have network capacity right now to get it back to me. So it's stuck. That's the 60%. The 40% where you're talking about operationally getting prepared for an RFP with a shipper or a manufacturer, or I need to bring 20 trailers over because I have to have 50 trailers staged for Amazon or 50 trailers staged for my backhaul, that's about 40%. But what you're still discussing is the overarching of operational trailer balance. No matter how big or small you are, you're going to get disjointed and dislocated. That's any company. There's no company professionally not seeing empty mile increases right now and trailer disjointment. But how you better manage it depends on who's actually going to survive throughout this economic downturn that we're experiencing with the pandemic. So it's a 60-40 ratio from the smaller guys dislocated to the larger folks saying, hey, I need to move 20, 30 trailers over to grab this RFP.
So I had a note to ask you about the economic picture right now and how that impacts this later, but let's talk about it now, since you brought it up, because I think it's key, right? Like, I mean, I don't think it's any secret right now that, I mean, first of all, let's level set. I'll try to always do this. It's not that there's zero freight in the market right now. It's just there's a lot of capacity and there's too much capacity fighting for the freight that there is. So that is necessarily going to mean that drivers are going to kind of go to extra lengths more
Correct.
than they would have a year ago to find freight, right? So what does that do to sort of that dislocation problem, and how do you help address that in a market like this?
That's what the pandemic exasperated. So with the pandemic, and we're talking macroeconomics now, supply and demand, when you're looking at a high spot and the spot market is high and it's paying $3.50 a mile, $4 a mile, and it's the carrier's way, and all the carriers are saying, woo, awesome, I'm making so much money. And they're running after freight. Typically during that time, what's happening is they're running after freight that is not within the lane or route guides that they've known are profitable specifically for that entity. So they begin to go, instead of contracted and dedicated focus, they begin to move their fleet slowly over to the spot because they're able to make up a profit differential from their dedicated that they're losing on. So everyone's going after the high dollar freight.
Yeah.
Right now, what we're experiencing is the inverse of that. So there's too many assets, there are too many trailers, too many trucks, and there are more trucks and trailers than there are freight. And when you have that inverse, you have a lower spot market. So right now, this is what they call the shippers market, and the shippers are running the world and the carriers are angry and upset. In this type of market, in this downturn for carrier or broker who's utilizing this, the way you manage it are through strategic partnerships and relationships with technology companies like ourselves.
Yep.
My RPM, if my cost per mile is $1.80, and I go out and I get a load, and the load is paying right now on the spot, you got some as low as $1.65.
$1.60.
I could be losing 15 cents a mile.
Yeah.
But if I'm running San Diego to Dallas and I'm losing 15 cents a mile, but I find out that there's a repositioned trailer that's paying $2,000 to go from San Diego to Dallas, which is the same lane I'm running, I now as a carrier or owner operator can say, wait, that's a 70 cent per mile increase. I just increased my rate per mile by 70 cents. I just turned a load from losing money, which maybe he took that load to get to Dallas because there was a high paying freight lane going from Dallas to Chicago. So he took the loss of $200 to get to a gain of, $4,000 from Dallas to Chicago. Well, instead of taking the loss, you're now making a gain to get to your higher paying freight. So on the greater scheme of things, we're trying our best to find ways for carriers to make it in this marketplace. Now, this is bi-directional because you have a carrier saying, I'm out of pocket, I'm out of network, my balance is off, I need to get balanced, I'm overpaying my dedicated drivers, I'm overpaying to get it moved. Can I use vHub to do it at a cost structure that's a little bit less? Yes, you can. And then you have a carrier on the opposite side saying, man, I need to increase my rate per mile to offset my steadily increasing cost per mile. And by doing this for you, I now have a chance to make more profit for my company. That is where you're seeing what they call that virtual trailer pool we discussed, where everyone is utilizing an asset in varying ways. But the byproduct of Eric Johnson rebalancing his freight fleet is Redmon Trucking can now make a higher rate per mile to help Eric balance it. And we're all going to see ourselves begin to balance out slowly but surely. It's the marketplace. It truly is a spot within trailer balance. It's not just a spot with freight any longer. There is a spot market within the trailer balancing networks.
Super interesting. Yeah, I think, in one of the chats that I had with you, and you had mentioned Jim, he talked about like essentially capacity is constrained when assets are out of place from where they need to be, right? And we think about this a little bit on the tractor side, but we often don't think about it on the trailer side. So how many stories do we write in the JOC about capacity being in the wrong place from a driver tractor perspective? We never dove into. I guess you guys were working on this in the middle of the pandemic, so.
But it's very similar though, because during the pandemic, the focus was so heavy on intermodal.
Yeah.
And everyone was saying, man, there's a lag time to get it taken off the ship and then to the port and then categorized and then put on the back of a chassis and then driven out to go to the customer. But then we ran into a second bottleneck. Once I finally got it into the port through drayage and I can get it out, well, then when I would drop it, sometimes that box would get stuck. And so to turn on the box to come back to port so that we can keep everything clear, it began to have a lag time there. So then you saw that boom in real estate where everyone was like, oh, I'm buying, big parcels of land so that they can bring boxes and just stack them up.
Yeah, an overflow yard. Yeah, for
Just
sure.
a pure overflow yard. Well, that's that thing that happened during the pandemic with intermodal. It was happening with dry vans as well. It was happening with reefers as well. And we don't consider large events that take place in America as capacity crunching and gobblers. But when the Rose Parade happens, or when the ball drops in New York City, and all of a sudden the 1,000 loads that were going into New York City in Manhattan is now 4,000 loads 2 weeks before because they're prepping for the onset of all these people. Well, that's disallocated and disjointed assets that typically wouldn't be going over there. I may only have one or two, and I always had a backhaul for the one or two that I sent. Now I have 50, and I still can only have my one or two. So now it may take me 6 months to get the additional 48 that were stuck there. But I have to pay for storage and rental. I have to pay for secured storage and rental at that. And I've now lost use. I have downtime in my asset. That asset that should be used for a profitable lane is now stuck, and I'm paying for it to be stuck. Yeah. And that's when you start seeing the cost per mile and operational cost for mega carriers all the way down to Billy Big Rig. You're seeing it start to increase because they're disjointed.
Yeah. So interesting. All right. So when I think about this, because this is Logtechlive, supposed to be talking about technology. You've talked a bit about it, but how much of this is like a technology problem versus a like adoption or change management system kind of new way of doing things problem for people? Is it?
It's both. Yeah. It's a technology problem because traditionally you have a dispatcher or coordinator who's doing all of this with the fleet manager in Excel. If it's not in Excel, then they may be utilizing a TMS plus Excel to keep up with their fleet. Yeah. And usually the yards that they're working with, the yard manager will say, yep, I'm going to keep you updated. I'm going to tell you when we move a trailer out or when it's allocated somewhere else. And there's usually a communication issue there. So the dispatcher may send a truck driver to go pick up a trailer and it's not there. So there was a large communication issue. So in our platform, what we've built is a way to follow this asset all the way through and notifying key contacts along the way. So you know what assets are at what yard. We're communicating with the yard managers and the fleet managers to get the best snapshot of that fleet's assets all day, every single day, whenever we engage with them. Hey, checking in with you. This is JD over at vHub. Do we still have those 20 trailers there? Oh, yes, we do. We have one reserved for tomorrow, so that'll change to 19. Thank you for that update. And we're watching and giving people a real-time snap of the assets that are available, which currently I think we have about over 500 that are needed for reposition on the platform now. So that's from
right this instant,
yes. So that's from a yard manager to a fleet manager, all utilizing one platform that allows them to communicate where is that asset. Do you want it to be any available and they can come pick up any of them? Do you want it to be a specific trailer and you have them going to a specific region? We are an extension of the planning tools that any dispatcher or fleet manager needs.
And what's the pricing in terms of, you don't have to give me the exact, like, what's the model? Like, are you taking a transaction fee on each thing that you empower, or is there a subscription that I pay to get a certain number of transactions?
That was a really big fight in our boardroom because everyone was saying, do we do subscription? Do we do licensing? And we were sitting there, Jim and myself, we were like, it should be free. And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, no, this should be free. This is a tool that any and everyone needs. Sign up is free. Inputting information is free. How we do make our money is on repositions. We take either an $80 fee or 10%. So that means if it's an $800 reposition that you're paying, we would take $80. If it's $1,000 that you're paying to get it repositioned from San Diego to Dallas, we would take 10%, which is $100. It's a very simple model on that aspect, but on the rental side, it's even easier. Eric Johnson says, JD, I want to put 10 trailers to rent. We take $1.75 per day from Eric Johnson to allow him to put it on our platform and manage that rental. At the end of it, the renter is charged 10% of the total contract, which we're not talking $30,000 and $40,000 rentals here. So this isn't, astronomical numbers. So we intentionally built verticals and streams of income that were simplistic so that it didn't overcomplicate trucking, which is
It's
already
not like the tax code.
Yes. Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. So you've talked a bit about this being a pain point for enterprise carriers all the way down to, single, owner operators, right? Can we talk a little bit about, because I mean, this is something we address, like the number of trailers that a carrier has per tractor is somewhat of an indicator of what type of business they like to run, right? So if they're 3 to 4 per tractor, then they're doing power only. Is that fair to say? If it's closer to 1 to 2 or less than 2, then not so much, right? What is that? How's that factor into how you work with them?
It factors in only from their perspective because vHub's platform is built to only meet your need. So if my need is to move 1 trailer or 2 trailers a month because I'm running purely as an operator, and an operator is usually going to be a truck with a trailer, not just bobtailing. If I'm running as an operator, then I have 1 trailer that got stuck. Awesome, we'll get that to you. Or I want to rent 2 additional assets because my trailers are having downtime maintenance. They're getting PM'd. I need to have these 2 trailers for the next month. Awesome, great. As you start to get to the larger enterprise levels, 100 truck fleet, 200, 300 truck fleet, depending on if they're going 1 to 3 ratios, 1 to 4 ratios, that's when you know that they are playing somewhat in the spot market or they have an increase in dedicated. And you have to ask that question. What are your lane prospectus right now? And what's your ratio from dedicated to spot? When you learn that and you figure out where they're getting clogged in certain areas, I get clogged up every time I go to Indiana, or I get clogged up every time I go to Paragould, Arkansas. You figure out where they are, and then you make that lane match with their need. So the system itself will produce exactly what the operator is looking for. You just have to put it in perspective of the marketplace. That's it. Yeah. We built a blanket platform that just reads what you need the best. That's essentially what vHub is.
Well, and the transactional pricing plays into that, right? Like if I'm a big user of it, I pay more because I'm using it more. If I only want to use it periodically, then I'm not committing to a huge subscription fee that I'm not getting full value out of. So,
and that periodical could be the smaller operator, or it could be a mega carrier who says, Eric, we run 5,000 trucks and we already have our carrier network. Sometimes we do get clogged up. JD, I want to run a private network. So there are entities that are running private networks on vHub where their assets are never shown to the marketplace.
Oh, it's just they're using it internally for their own network, essentially. Interesting. Okay. All right.
And then when they get clogged up, they have an option to open it up to the entire marketplace, which we only allow carriers verified COI again. We're looking at safety scores. We're double checking that this isn't double brokering. We've partnered up with Highway to do our best with that, because even in trailers, we are finding double brokers are coming through trying to gobble up and grab as many assets as they can. So we bring in integrity.
That's the hot topic of the day now, double broker. So.
It was double brokering was glamorized during the pandemic. Sit on your couch, make a whole lot of money, and you don't have to touch any assets. And people were selling courses for $10,000 buy-ins to teach people how to be a trucking company or in logistics, not knowing that they were actually enabling double brokering, which causes usually the highest theft, misplacements of assets. Double brokering puts bad taste in everyone's mouth. It can ruin relationships with the shipper from the broker carrier standpoint. We're all fighting it together right now.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting development to see everyone kind of really focused on that. It was a Wild West in a lot of ways, right? So, Cool. This has been amazing. I swear I've learned even more than what we'd already talked about before. I learned a ton today. I hope everyone else did too. So last question I ask this of all my guests. Who's your favorite musician or band? And you have to tell me why. I know it's tough. This is like the hardest question I give to people, right? So
Well, it's tough because my favorite artist is someone that I know no one who's watching this has ever heard of. I'm from Louisiana. I'm a Louisiana Cajun boy. My favorite artist is a Louisiana artist named Chris Arduin. Chris Arduin is a Zydeco band lead singer. So Zydeco is a mix of French jazz.
yeah.
Think about what you hear when you're in the French Quarter of New
I was
Orleans.
gonna
That
say when you're in New Orleans, you probably have heard it even if you didn't know what it is. So
yeah, it's usually an accordion lead, heavy bass. I love Chris Arduin and New Step, and then another Zydeco artist is J. Paul Jr. So that's usually it. If I wanted to go mainstream, um, because it's in my house and my fiance listens to her every day, Beyonce is becoming a favorite.
I mean,
I
the
can't be
queen,
ashamed of that.
the queen, you can't go wrong with her. It's interesting. I keep threatening to put together a Spotify playlist of all my guests' favorite musicians
Do
because
it.
some people there's been some really cool like under the radar recommendations, and then like my guest last week was like Led Zeppelin, and someone said Jay-Z like a few months ago, and I'm like, all
Yep.
right, it's a good mix of like, okay, ones we all know and ones that like brand new. So I appreciate it. That's an awesome one. I'm pretty sure you're gonna be the only one to recommend those two, but
I think
uh
that sounds cool because if you did that, you could have a playlist for every year of your podcast.
there you go. There you go. Yeah. Now you putting me on the spot here. I got to do it. JD, what's the best way for people to reach you?
The best way is on LinkedIn. Send me a DM on LinkedIn if you have any questions on opposite sides of it. I'll answer you. And then also my email is JD period Redmon, my last name at vhubapp.com. Quickest ways to get to me. I promise I'll respond. I will annoy you if I think this solution will help you. I want to apologize about annoying you.
You are in sales. That come on, you're upfront about it, so it's all good. All good.
Shoot your shot.
Yeah, that's right. You make 0% of shots you don't take. So,
Shooters got to shoot, baby.
JD, thanks so much. This has been awesome. Really glad, way overdue, but glad we could finally make this happen.
Exactly. I agree. I love it. And I'll tell you now, I'm going to get myself and my team back to the Inland Distribution Conference. I wanted to say it again publicly. I said it to you when I got ready to leave last year. That was the best, no gimmicks, no glitz and glam, pure industry knowledge conference I've ever experienced. And I mean that in an operator's way. I mean that in understanding the continuity in the supply chain from maritime to dredge into warehouse to manufacturer, carrier to broker back into the shipper and how they've ordered into maritime. You were able to see the red ribbon throughout transportation last year. And I've been to every conference and I enjoy all of them. This isn't bad mouthing any of them, but I'm saying if you want to come and learn, and if you want to sit in a room with people who say, here's a problem and we're going to solve it as best as we can today and tomorrow, come to Inland Distribution.
Well, I appreciate it. We'll get a testimonial from you one of these days. So, thanks, JD. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon. All right. All right. Great conversation. I literally knew I heard the term loadout a million times, but I'd never actually truly understood it at a deep level until I began talking to JD and his team. So, all right, really quickly, dad joke of the week. I hope I haven't said this one before. I feel like there's something in the back of my head that's making me say I've said this one before, but just pretend you didn't hear it. All right. What does a meteor use to buy coffee? Starbucks, of course. It's another one from my son. If you have any complaints, you know where to send those. Not to me. Great show. Thank you, everyone, once again for tuning in. I love that you take time out of your day to join us twice a month. This is like my favorite thing I do each month is have these great conversations with some of the most interesting people in our industry. We'll be back June 2nd for our next episode. I'm on vacation that week, so I have a guest host. We'll be letting you know very soon who's filling in for me and who our guest is. But thank you all. And well, I'll be back in about a month, mid-June, with next episode from me of Logtechlive, but hope you will all tune in on the 2nd. And someone support the Blended Pledge. Bye.